how you can adapt. Like that was going to be one of my lessons, but I decided to move against it because basically these people that live there, they don't even recognize it. It smells bad. And after a while, after being there like an hour, I was like adjusted to it. But when I first got out of that SUV, it smelled like death, a cross between death and vomit and feces. Like it was like, I could not, I was like, it hit me and I was like, oh my God, it smells bad. So I first put a handkerchief around my mouth, but then it didn't really do anything. So I just ended up taking it off and you get used to it. And that is an amazing thing about the human condition. But in any event, I saw this kid that stepped on this, that had this blood on his gash. And the first thought I thought was, this kid's getting tetanus, right? I mean, he's going to get shots. He doesn't have his shots. And my second thought was, my God, these kids and their parents don't have the means to buy foot protection. So when we left, I had my cousin drive me to a local department store. And the irony here is the kids didn't have shoes. The #1 department store and one of the richest men in the world, and certainly the richest guy in the Philippines, owns a department store called Shoe Mart. He made his money by selling shoes, and it became a huge department store. Now he owns the beer company and the airline company, but he owns everything now. But he's a super wealthy man. I went to a local Shoe Mart, and I bought as many pairs of shoes that would fit in the SUV, about 50 to 60 pairs. I should have thought about it and taken away the boxes, but I just stacked the boxes into the back of the SUV. We drove back to Smoky Mountain, and I handed out the shoes to these kids. And it was like a mob. Like, I mean, like if I'd love to see like an aerial view of the car, because as we pull out, we get out of the car, no one's there. And then I open up the back, and then kids sort of look. And then I started handing out my first pair, and then it was like a mob scene, mobbing the car. And the interesting thing is, I don't remember any of the 50 kids that I gave the shoes to, but I do remember the 51st kid, the first kid not to get a pair of shoes. Like he looked up at me with his big brown eyes and he said, "Sir, where are my pair?" And I looked at the back of the SUV and I looked at him and I was like, there are no more. And his eyes started welling up and he goes, "Sir, but I need shoes." And I mean, it was devastating. I mean, and that's when I made my vow to never go back and do something nice to a place where I didn't have enough to donate. So when we do our donations now, we work with local nonprofits to determine the number, to do a head count of the people that need sandals, and then we'll make them, and we'll always have extras, but we'll make them so that we can handle the entire community. So then throughout my travels to Southeast Asia, I traveled to Vietnam and Cambodia, and in Vietnam I actually spied a guy wearing sandals very similar to the Pagna model, the first model. And I looked at them and I was like, wow, those look really cool. They look like they're made out of recycled rubber. And I thought back to the Philippines. The people that live on the shantytown live there so they can sort garbage. They sort paper, plastic, metal, rubber. And if they sort enough, if they're lucky, they make $1 a day, 50 pesos, and that's enough for dinner. They don't work, they don't make dinner. It's like so easy. Yet they're so happy. And I think it's because they're not successful, but they're fulfilled, right? And that's the difference between success and, so that goes back to the first lesson. But so I went and asked this guy, where did he get the shoes? He didn't speak English, he didn't speak Mandarin, but he took me by the hand and he walked me to this local shoemaker who carved me out a pair of shoes in about a minute. And then he fashioned the straps, poked in the straps. In about 2 minutes, he custom made a pair of shoes for me. And I thought, oh my God. I thought back to the shantytown and I thought, they have a whole area of rubber that's just collecting rainwater, breeding mosquitoes, and the community. Dengue fever is something that's a huge issue in Southeast Asian countries and Latin American countries. America, you've never heard of it, right? You've heard of malaria, but maybe not dengue fever. Dengue fever, it's even worse than malaria. There were 80 million cases last year of dengue fever, and unless it's treated early and regularly, it has a high fatality rate. So when we did our first shoe drop, I went walking through the shantytown just to see the people that I was going to meet, and about every 100 yards there was another funeral, like a memorial, with a casket, like a really small-sized casket in the house. And whenever I asked them, like, what happened there? And they said, oh, my baby died. I would say, well, how? Dengue fever. Like, even though it's 80 million cases, it seems like all of them are in the Philippines. And, I mean, everyone that's dying in the Philippines is of dengue fever. So, at least if you're young. So you get bitten by a mosquito, they don't have time, they don't have the money for the medication, so then they end up dying. So, so I went back and I thought about the shantytown, I thought about the shoes, and I thought, wow, I have two stakeholders. I've got the people that need shoes, and I've got people that can make shoes out of the products. I've got these out-of-work employees, I can teach them how to make the suit, and we've got the raw material. But I didn't have that third stakeholder, which was the idea on how am I going to pay for it, right? Like I could pay these guys to make them, and donate them, but then eventually that's only limited by my ability to pay, and the minute I stop funding it, the business dies. So it's not sustainable. So I needed that third element, and basically I came back to New York so serious about the idea that I took a footwear class with Emily Putterman. Emily Putterman, if you know anything about footwear, she's not the best game in town, she's the only game in town. She teaches at FIT, Parsons, Pratt, the Jewish Community Center, and all she teaches is shoemaking, how to make shoes, but not manufacturing shoes, but hand-making shoes, like in the old school way that they do in France and Italy and Spain, where you start with a last and you sew leather on it, and then you eventually make your pattern, then you pull the last out of the leather, and then you have a shoe, and then you put in your insole and your bottom sole, midsole. So I took 3 footwear classes with Emily Putterman, and even though we were learning to make high-end women's stilettos or boots, it was just being in that environment that was stimulating, like learning the vocabulary of the construction of a shoe, also how a shoe works, how straps need to work to support a foot. So, and also shoe drawing, so that I could send to my artisans sketches so that I would they would be able to make them. So in that process, I didn't really know what that third business model, that third stakeholder was, how I was going to pay for it. But I still was encouraged, and I still went forward with the shoemaking classes. It took maybe a year. Each class was maybe 2 or 3 months, so it took a year of classes. And then in the third, maybe about half a year in, I was reading the New York Times, and this is a lesson too. You'll get your aha moments at any time, so just don't stay in your dorm and don't stay in your office if you're working. Like, try to get out, because it helps stimulate to get you your aha moments. But in any event, I was reading the New York Times, and there was a company called One Laptop Per Child. You guys familiar with that? Basically, it was a company that their mission was to give laptops away to children, and the way that they were going to do it was they were going to make a $100 laptop. So it was the advent of the netbook. As the technology changed, this company, One Laptop Per Child, made the technology and the equipment necessary to reduce the prices of laptops. Before then, laptops were $1,000. Then One Laptop Per Child came, and technology and open source areas and cheaper chips and hardware came about, where they got it to around $150 or $200. They never made it to $100, but they still donated lots of them. And the way they funded it was, if you bought one, they would give one away. And I thought, buy one, give one. And I had my aha moment. I thought, if I could figure out the pricing of these sandals, and I could price them at an appropriate rate where an American or European or Australian would buy it at an affordable rate, yet it would be enough to pay for the other one that I'm giving back, then I've got my funding model. So we did the numbers, and so if you go to our website, you can get a sandal. Actually, I think now we're out of stock because NPR just did a special on us. But if you go to our, each sandal is $45, and that's enough to pay for the sandal itself, the box, as well as another sandal that we're donating away. And so we had our business model, and that's the story of GreenSoul Shoes. The second lesson, so the first lesson is don't confuse success with passion, and always follow your passion, or understand what your passion is and understand how your success will work with your passion, right? The second lesson I have is to easily remember it, just think of the most popular vowels. What are the most popular, 3 of the most popular vowels? Call them out. Vowels? There's only 5 of them, guys. A, E, and O, right? Those are the 3 most popular. So just think of those A, E, and O, and then, but the equation is going to be E plus A equals O. Okay, E plus A equals O. So basically, E stands for events, right? Events plus A is actions, your actions, equals O, which is outcome, all right? So I want you guys to always think about this, because events happen to everyone, right? I mean, and you can't control them, right? But where do people live when events happen? Like, if a person gets mugged, oh, I got mugged. They always focus on the mugging or the hurricane, right? Whatever is on the news, the hurricane, a robbery, a shooting. Events happen. I mean, stuff happens. You can't control it. So why focus on it? The only thing you can control that will affect your outcome is your actions. So if you have a specific event, on a completely different side note, I was kidnapped for ransom when I was in the Philippines for 22 days. Kidnapped. Under gun, and I was in chains for 22 days. That's an event. I had no control over that. Other people can perform these events on you. Natural events can happen. Accidents happen. But you can't control them. The only thing you can control are your actions that at that particular time, and the actions will directly the only